Hello, good morning, everyone. It is Friday, March the 13th, and welcome to 7 Investing Live. This is our live stream show we host every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time to focus on several of the stock market's most intriguing opportunities and most controversial investing topics, which is where we're going to go today. We're going to jump right in to the feud that's going on between Hims and Hers and Novo Nordisk. I'm excited to start talking about that here in a moment. Again, my name is Simon Erickson. I am the founder of 7 Investing. You can check out our entire scorecard of recommendations at 7investing.com/recommendations. And you get your first 7 days free if you go to 7investing.com/subscribe. Let me get right back to that cliffhanger I mentioned a moment ago. Here's kind of what's going on. This is the drama that's unfolding between Novo Nordisk and Hims and Hers. I liken it to a TV show drama where you've got high school friends who are bickering and you're kind of overhearing what's going on and saying, okay, yeah, I hope these two figure it out because this is going to have an impact for me and the rest of my high school year. That's what's going on with Hims and Hers and Novo Nordisk right now. I want to give a little bit of background first to set the stage, 10,000 foot level of what's going on here. Then we'll talk about what this restructured agreement between the two companies that they signed on Monday, what are the specifics that are going on with that? And then looking forward, if you're investing in either Novo Nordisk or Hims and Hers, both of which are publicly traded companies, very large companies making a good name for themselves here in America. What is this going to mean? What is the implication going to be for these businesses and then also for their investors? But let's start with the story on how we've gotten here. Novo Nordisk is a massive company. This is a Danish pharmaceutical company. They've been around for more than 100 years, had their 100th year anniversary just this last year, and has typically focused on the diabetes market, right? In fact, some of their drugs are glucagon-like peptides. These are glucagon-like peptide 1 hormones. These are synthetically derived hormones that mimic the body's own hormones that have traditionally been used to treat diabetes, right? When people were diabetic, they needed control of their blood sugar levels. This was something that mimicked the body's own hormone. And they've realized in recent years, even though they've been treating diabetes for an entire century now, they've realized recently that these GLP-1 molecules can also be used as satiety hormones for the satiation of the brain, and it's regulating the activity of when it makes you hungry. Right, so if you can use these, you can actually regulate your appetite, keep you from eating too much. Has been used to treat type 2 diabetes. And this is a chronic condition, right? This is not just a pill that's a weight loss pill, which we've seen in the past. We've seen this attempted many times over decades. But Novo did some really in-depth scientific studies. They got the FDA approval, and then they launched a product, Wegovy, which was an injection you could take for weight loss, right? This was an injection, and all of a sudden, it caught on incredibly well within the United States. Wegovy immediately the demand in the U.S. began to outpace the supply. And what happened is Novo Nordisk, I think, was a little bit surprised even at its own success. In fact, it did not invest heavily enough into its own capacity to supply an amount of semaglutide, which is the drug, the active ingredient that's in Wegovy. It didn't make enough supply to keep up with the demand that Americans were showing for this drug. And when you have an FDA-approved drug that is undersupplied to market demand, the FDA can come back out and say, hey, this is on our FDA shortage list. This is on our supply shortage list. There are patients with conditions that need this drug that you are not able to give enough of a supply for. And so it opens up an exemption where third parties can buy the active ingredient, either provide the drug in a non-branded format or in a compounded version to patients and sell it on their own, because Novo Nordisk is already sold out, right? They don't have enough supply to meet the demand. They're selling as much as they possibly can. They're doing certainly very well with Wegovy, but there's an unmet need in the market that the shortage list covers, and others can enter this market. And that happened in 2022. That was 4 years ago. In the 4 years since then, we have seen, as you might expect with the demand for this drug being as popular as it has been, several compounding firms who are compounding these drugs going out and selling weight loss treatments that use semaglutide, but also not at the same pricing that Novo Nordisk was charging. And keeping in mind, these are very expensive drugs. Weight loss for a while has not been covered at all by Medicare or by many other insurance companies at all. And if you were paying out of pocket for the shot, for the injection that Novo Nordisk was offering for Wegovy, weekly shot that you would get, it would cost you about $1,300 to $1,600 out of pocket per month. which is a lot of money for people to pay out of pocket for a medication like this, especially with no insurance reimbursement. But a lot of these third-party compounders, which is where Hims and Hers enters the picture here and enters the storyline, said, what we can do is we can actually take the semaglutide, we can mix it with other ingredients, and we can have a compounded version of this drug that you can also take safely, we believe, and we'll sell that for a couple $100s a month. In fact, $300 a month would seem like a reasonable price point. About 25% of what you would be paying, at least 25%, maybe even lower than that, of what you'd be paying for Wegovy for the branded drug. And so not surprisingly, a company like Hims and Hers, who this is not their only business, this is one part of a very diversified direct-to-consumer online platform that they're offering medications for. Hims and Hers says, yes, we can now offer weight loss drugs using the same active ingredient that you'd be getting with Wegovy from Novo Nordisk. You can get it for a fraction of the cost. You can get it directly there online. There you can see the compounded semaglutide. You can take it different doses as an injection originally. And Novo Nordisk had no recourse to this. There was nothing they could do about it. This was approved by the FDA to do this. These drugs were not FDA approved on their own. And there began to kind of create, the feud began to kind of start because of this. Novo Nordisk couldn't do anything about it, but it didn't like that, one, it wasn't getting the own business from its own branded drugs, but two, there was no safety claims on this. In fact, a lot of these compounders, which we don't want to name names on this, but this is where the gossip and the drama starts to get interesting, was being sourced from Chinese suppliers that were not visited by the FDA, right? Semaglutide is a powder. It's a white powder. You can compound it with others, and then you can put it into injection that you would shoot later on. But a lot of times the administration of this was not FDA inspected, not FDA approved, based overseas, and a lot of them were having traces of illegit ingredients that were being compounded in there as well. And Novo Nordisk said, hey, yellow flag, red flag, this is a safety risk for patients. One, we want to make sure you're using exactly the way that we have this FDA-approved drug for the efficacy. But then also, we're not going to make a comment or we're not going to support anyone who's putting ingredients in there that have not been FDA-approved or have not been at least FDA inspected, especially if they're coming overseas. And so this has become a really big drama. This has been a really big fight, a big feud that's going on with Novo Nordisk and other compounders, especially Hims and Hers. And the plot thickens in February of 2025, 3 years after the supply shortage goes out in the first place, when the FDA comes back and says, okay, we are actually taking semaglutide off of the shortage list again. We are confident enough in Novo Nordisk's capacity improvements that they've made, which even included acquisitions for capacity in that time frame, that we now think that Novo Nordisk has enough supply to meet the demand of the market in America. So we're taking it off the shortage list. And it's up to you, Novo Nordisk, to figure out how do you want to handle all the other companies that have now been manufacturing products that have your active ingredients in there. And for a while, Novo Nordisk actually didn't do anything about this. It's been more than 1 year now. It's been 1 year and 1 month since the supply shortage has been lifted. And the FDA says, this is your patent protected molecule. You can enforce it how you want to. And Novo Nordisk, for a little while, actually didn't take any action against Hims and Hers. There was no patent infringement. Patients were being supplied by Hims and Hers. They didn't want to go out there and anger patients who were getting the drug. But there was still kind of like this, hey, you've got to do it under our terms. We really want you to be charging the pricing we want. We want to make sure that you're using, FDA-approved suppliers for semaglutide and all these other things. And the plot really thickened here in January of this year, 2026 now. As if the plot and the gossip couldn't get any juicier. Now, the FDA has approved Novo Nordisk to manufacture an oral pill where you get the same semaglutide ingredient in Wegovy, but it's in a pill. It's not a shot anymore, right? And so all of a sudden you've got an oral pill. This is, of course, going to catch on very, very well. There's what it looks like. Wegovy as tablets for semaglutide. This is going to expand the market a lot, not just because some patients don't really like to get shots. They would much prefer to take a pill, rather than administering a shot itself, but also just kind of makes it much more available, right? It's much more easy to ship pills. You don't have the same constraints with supply shortages for injections and other things out there as well. 1 month after Novo Nordisk releases its own Wegovy pill, Hims and Hers is back out there with its own off-branded semaglutide oral tablet. There it is, Hims and Hers. Again, the same thing. Other ingredients in there. The active ingredient is still semaglutide, but again, a lower cost pill that's an oral pill that, again, is piggybacking right there off of the patent and the FDA approval that semaglutide has that belongs to Novo Nordisk. And Novo was so excited to release its Wegovy pill for $150 to $300 per month, depending on the dosage. This was kind of a big, big party. You've got the new drug that's out there. It's catching on. You're got a great new income stream. You're really excited about that. And it kind of steals some of their thunder that within 4 weeks after that, you've now got Hims and Hers offering for $50 a month, somewhere between 1/3 and 1/6 the price of your newest pill. Is right out there immediately, and they've launched their own pill. Novo Nordisk says enough is enough. We are putting a patent infringement case on you on this. We are going to shut down you from offering this product. You cannot market it. You cannot sell it on your site, anything else. We're getting the lawyers involved. We're bringing this to court. We're getting the legal system to do its thing. And within 2 days after their launch, Hims and Hers pulls the Wegovy knockoff pill. They say, okay, we're not going to do this. We're not going to mess with this. We don't want to go to court about this one. And the latest in the drama has happened on Monday of this week. That was March the 9th. We got an update. This is a very popular, trending topic right now, that the two have maybe mended a little bit of their friendship. Maybe this is not the spouting and the spitting match that it was back in January when the lawyers came out and they started suing each other. Novo Nordisk came back and they said, you know what, we're going to pull back on that patent infringement case we were putting up against you. We are going to allow you to sell Wegovy on your platform, even in its oral pill form, but you cannot sell any compounded versions of the drug, and you must offer it at the same self-pay patient pricing that we are offering through other distribution agreements. But you can sell and you can market Wegovy as long as you do it under our terms. And Hims and Hers says, we're really excited about this. This is going to be fantastic. We're excited to partner with Novo Nordisk. We think this is meeting patients where they are, and we're looking forward to continuing this relationship. That's the feud. That's the what he said, she said, and the gist of what's going on. It's been a interesting 4 years for Novo Nordisk, underestimating their own potential in the weight loss drug market, going out and the relationships that they formed with patients, and then the relationships they formed with other distributors and other compounders over the last several years. And then now the tenderness of some of those relationships as we kind of work out the details of who's selling what to who and at what price point. And again, Novo Nordisk is the manufacturer of this product. This is an integrated, Danish pharmaceutical company. They've got all the manufacturing, they've got the patents and the IP, but it's Hims and Hers that's got the distribution and the direct relationships with customers who prefer to work with them because it's working very well for a variety of different medical conditions, weight loss being one of many. So where do we stand on this? If you're investing in this space, do you buy Novo Nordisk, NVO, ticker on that one? Do you buy Hims and Hers, HIMS, publicly traded company too? There are options on how to play this, or do you just wait out to see how this is going to unfold? I will say this market itself is absolutely massive. The diabetes market is a $100 billion market. Novo Nordisk controls about 30% of, about a third of this global $100 billion market that it's been working with for the last 100 years. The weight loss drug market could be twice as large as the global diabetes market. It could be worth up to $200 billion as we start to see the adoption of weight loss drugs, especially the GLP-1s, and even more especially as this transitions from being an injection to an oral pill. This is an absolutely massive market that could be twice the size as the market that Novo has been developing for the last century that's now worth $100 billion. It could be a $200 billion market for weight loss drugs. So this really matters. And it's not just Novo's active ingredient and branded drugs versus the compounders that factors into this too, right? Eli Lilly has got its own active ingredient, or Florgripon, which is branded as Zepbound for their weight loss drugs. This is another branded, IP protected, patent protected product that Eli Lilly is interested in getting, a slice of this pie, pardon the pun, as well. This is a huge market. You're going to see a lot of competition, not only from the branded, patent protected competitors like Lilly, but also the compounders as well. And by the way, Eli Lilly's pricing is very similar to Novo Nordisk. They want to protect their patents and get a return on their investment. I think as we go forward with this, I have a couple takeaways for investors. And I want this to be kind of part one of two. We've already been talking for 15 minutes, just explaining the gossip and the hype and all of this this feud and bickering that's going on. We've got another part of this. It's going to be just, what is the financial impact to these businesses? How are they going to manage this? What is going to matter for investors going forward? And I think a sneak peek of that is, first of all, the pricing power that Novo Nordisk, excuse me, is able to command in the United States, I think is slipping a little bit. This is a drug that had a very, very high gross margin profile. I believe it was an 85 or 86% gross margin profile for semaglutide that was going into Wegovy and then being sold for weight loss in the United States. It's a very, very, very profitable drug. Are they going to be able to sell that for $1,600 a month anymore for the injections? Are they going to have to accept a lower price point, knowing that there's competition on all fronts from this? Yes, I think so. And you're actually already seeing that. You're already seeing concessions for Medicare and Medicaid coverage, which in certain instances is providing coverage locally for these drugs in certain jurisdictions of the United States. That's really good to see a large payer on board, but they're not going to agree to the same terms that you had to self-pay as a patient. And then also just the pricing itself of the pills. The Wegovy pill is priced at $150 a month. That's a tenth of $1,600 a month that you used to be getting for the injection. Is Novo going to accept lower margins for that? Yes, they are. And I think that's just part of growing into this $200 billion market. You're going to have to accept a lower margin profile, lower profits. As it catches on, you have more competition. Number two is the legal angle. Who actually owns the IP? The IP itself for semaglutide belongs to Novo Nordisk, and it's up to them on how they want to approach those that infringe upon their patents. There's been a little bit of a gray area in recent years. That gray area has turned into more of a fine line on what is patent infringement now here today. And you've seen for the first time in 4 years, Novo flex its legal and IP muscle and go out there and have a case against hims and hers. Is that going to continue? I think so. You've got a new CEO at Novo Nordisk. Mike Dowstar is the new CEO of the company, just came in last year, probably because he's an operations specialist and he's grown on several continents, the distribution frameworks that Novo Nordisk has in place. I think, based on everything I know about Mike so far, he is going to stick to his guns on the patents. And he's going to take a harder line than they did in the past because this is their IP and they've got to protect their IP if they want to protect their profits growing forward. We know there's a lot of scripts. We know this is a massive market. You can play in a variety of different ways. I think Novo Nordisk is going to crack down a little bit more on patents going forward. This might not be the last patent case that we see them fighting out there against other competitors. How is this administered? That's the third thing to look at. A lot of this discussion has been about the oral pill. The tablet just came out in January. We're only 3 months in. It's going to be really interesting to see what do the quarterly results look like for semaglutide in oral format, for Novo Nordisk, for the Wegovy pill, for Lilly Zepbound pill, and then any other oral tablet that's being used for weight loss. This is just now catching on to something that might be an inflection point. That might be enough to just juice revenues here in the short term of 2026 that we're actually start forgetting about some of these cases. Some of these patent cases might fall into the background within a year or two, and because just the market's growing so quickly and you need to focus on making sure you're supplying a red hot market. And then the originations, the last piece of this is the supply. I think it's an underrepresented story about where is the product being manufactured, right? We kind of, for a little while there, we were okay with it. We realized that there was a supply shortage and maybe we were going to have some concessions on shipping product in from overseas, especially if it wasn't FDA reviewed. I think there's going to be a tightening of supply because there's going to be a lot more focus on, hey, wait, where is this product being manufactured? Is it certified? Has it been visited by someone from the FDA and signed off on? What are the other ingredients that are being in there with it? What is the safety profile of these drugs? We haven't talked about that as much as we need to be talking about. And I think that's going to come back into the narrative again here in 2026. So I, as an investor, I'm a big fan of Novo Nordisk. I think that just they've got the manufacturing footprint in place. They own the patents for these products. They, I think, have really tightened the screws on the organization as a whole. They really are more focused on commercial execution now rather than just R&D and developing new drugs. I think this is going to be a very profitable organization going forward, and they're going to be one of the front runners along there right with Eli Lilly in developing this new market that could be worth $200 billion in the near future. On the other hand, I think it's very likely to expect they are going to lose some market share. Not only to Lilly, but also to the compounders. You just saw this renegotiated agreement. Novo has pulled its patent infringement case. They are allowing now hims and hers to sell semaglutide at Wegovy's, patient pay pricing, self-pay pricing. That's a big development too, that Novo says, hey, we do not have that final connection and relationship with patients, we want to have direct-to-consumer platforms like Hims and Hers out there selling our drugs. That's been something they've got to have an understanding of how important that is. Patients want to do it on their terms. Meet your patients where they are and allow for a company like Hims and Hers to operate in the space that they operate in. And I think for Hims and Hers too, actually, this is a really good development, right? This is a good outcome for them. It was a very debatable relationship, a very contentious, controversial relationship for several years. This, I think, is setting up the boundaries a little bit more. We're putting in the what is out of bounds line, and it's a much more clear relationship. So now Hims can say, okay, look, we know what you're going to enforce on. We know what you're going to let us get away with. Now let's focus on growing both of our businesses and figuring out how we carve out our profits while also helping you as a business for your goals that you have as well. And the overhang is no longer there. There is with no patent infringement case ongoing, clears a lot of the risk and uncertainty that was previously an overhang on Hims and Hers stock. So strangely, I think this is the outcome that happened on Monday. As much as I hate to say that, I think that both companies won. I think that this feud is actually good for both Novo Nordisk and for Hims and Hers, being that we are in a red hot market and these agreements have to be in place because there's a lot of money at stake. But as an investor, I'm probably comfortable with either one of them at this point. I am a big fan of Novo Nordisk. You've seen me write quite a bit on 7investing.com. You can see our previous recommendations of that business, what we liked about them years ago and how this has evolved in the years since then. But I also think this is going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on, just because there's a lot at stake here. It's really a red hot market. Again, very, very popular, and it's going to have a lot of impact, not only on the financials and for these companies themselves, but also on patients. This is going to be able to prevent a lot of problems from happening downstream for patient health. I think it's a really good win for health in America and the entire healthcare system as a whole. It's 9:24 Central Time. I deserve a break, and I'm going to stop talking for a moment and drink some coffee. I would love to open it to you to hear if you have any thoughts or insights or questions about everything we just talked about with Hims and Hers and Novo Nordisk.
I sure do. And you do deserve a break. One thing about compounding pharmacy inspections that I have read about and found really interesting in the past is the FDA will do these things called 503A inspections. But 503A inspections on the pharmacies and the production facilities don't actually test the drugs to see if they're safe or not. It's all about sanitary conditions. And so it's just making sure that they're adhering to guidance on the safety of the facility, but not actually what's going into the drug necessarily, especially in the overseas ones. So just because a compounding pharmacy advertises that they are using a supplier that is 503B, it does not mean that what's going into your drug is necessarily tested. That's just something to watch out for, because it sounds very official and very safe, but a little scary. Just something to watch out for. Does Hims and Hers provide prescribing? Okay.
Yes, it's a telehealth provider, so you can buy the drugs, right there online. But typically, if it requires a prescription, you just do a quick appointment with one of their consultants. They say yes, you are a good eligible candidate for this, and then we're going to ship it directly to you over the mail.
Gotcha. Okay, so that is a really actually beneficial for Novo Nordisk, because it's removing the barrier of having to go to your doctor being like, well, I don't know. It's because they're going to approve you. It's in their financial best interest as long as you qualify.
Yeah, and from a patient's perspective, a lot of this is kind of taboo, right? Like you don't want to talk about some of these conditions. You want to talk to a specialist and just kind of like have them do the thing. It shows up in the box at your doorstep, easy breezy. Not to mention, it's a lot easier to do a telehealth appointment now than to go to the doctor, schedule the appointment, get the prescription, get it filled, everything else. Just a much more efficient way of doing it. Hims and Hers figured that out really well.
Are the pills significantly cheaper to manufacture because you don't have to keep them refrigerated? You don't need the injector. So even though they're so much cheaper for the buyer, are they still decent profit margins?
It's something I need to take a closer look at. And again, this just came out in January, so I think we'll probably get it in the next quarterly results if Novo is willing to break that out. Again, the active ingredient itself is still semaglutide. That's still going to be the same thing that's manufactured by Novo. But like you said, different way of administering. You don't need the shot. You don't need a lot of the other ingredients. a little bit different. It's going to change the margin profile, no doubt.
Okay, interesting. Um, I think those are my primary questions. We had a question in chat, but about AAOI, LITE. Now we're talking about the feud between Novo Nordisk and Hims and Hers today, not semiconductor stocks. But we got some good past episodes on those.
Applied
PNG.
Optoelectronics, AAOI. That was a fun show we did. I think it was, what was it, last week or 2 weeks ago?
That was such
Um,
a good show.
yeah, we've had some fun talks about semiconductors. I would recommend, let's see, at P&G, go check out that one we had with Eric Bleeker. We talked about applied optoelectronics, which popped on the day that we had that show. So that's another good one we had last month. And I might leave it at that,
Okay.
Heather. Maybe we'll close the show out with this one. This is again an ongoing feud. This is something that I do want to revisit again because it is so new. We just got the update. We just got the oral pill for Wegovy in January, and then just on Monday, we've seen kind of the first week of this. Oh, hey, guess what? We're friends again. We're back on each other's graces again. I'm not sure if we can definitively say this is the last time that there's going to be bickering between these two. There's a lot of money at stake here, and we're going to look at the financials and how this impacts Novo Nordisk and Hims and Hers. I will say also that Novo Nordisk stock has been completely out of favor during the last 12 months. Investors are jumping ship and saying there's too many uncertainties, and we didn't like the way that you handled this agreement in the first place, and we didn't like that you underinvested in supply capacity. There was a while that Novo Nordisk was like the market darling. It was the stock market. It's one of the best performers, really, really expensive stock. And everyone was so excited about the opportunity to use semaglutide for weight loss. Now I feel like the pendulum has swung the other way. It feels like there's a little bit too much pessimism today in Novo Nordisk shares, especially with the valuation, the pricing where it's at. And by the way, you're getting a nice little dividend too, as you're waiting for this to resolve at a pretty good valuation. I think that's a pretty good opportunity if you're comfortable with the IP and this company that's been around for 100 years doing its thing, and then maybe a little bit of hurdles and some growing pains as it enters this new market that it's developed.
They have a significant other portfolio outside of Wegovy. It's not just
Ozempic,
Wegovy.
yeah, Ozempic for
Yeah.
diabetes was the big one, which again, $100 billion market. They're the market leader in that. They made an acquisition of Dicerna a couple years ago for RNAi interference. Some cool pipeline stuff that they're working on. But you got to go where the money is, right? If the blockbusters on weight loss drugs, there's kind of an everything else that matters like a little bit, and then you're really, really big market. You've got to get right if you're going to move the needle for this.
I
Move
do
the
have
needle,
one
pun
final
intended.
question,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. One
Um,
more.
the moving the drug into pill form is in no way part of their patent, right? Like Lilly can move Zepbound. I'm sure there's other ones I can't think of right now. Into pill form without causing any problems, right?
Must be FDA approved. You can't
Well,
just say
yeah,
I've got
but
something that's approved.
Novo
Yeah,
Nordisk doesn't own that. They don't. I mean, that's not patentable, right?
that's correct. Anybody can
Yeah.
put their drug into a pill that gets approved by the FDA if it's
Okay.
their IP. Yeah.
Cool. That's what I just wanted to clarify and make sure that putting the drug glutide into a pill was not something.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, Eli Lilly is a direct comp for Novo Nordisk, right? These are two large pharmaceutical companies, branded drugs, going through the patent process and the FDA approval. And you've seen a lot less pessimism with Eli Lilly because of the execution stuff, right? It's Novo, mea culpa. We messed up. We didn't invest in capacity. Eli Lilly jumped at the opportunity, and the stock is not half glass half empty like it is with Novo right now. So I think the question is, can Novo fix the issues they have and normalize the valuation multiples the market is going to award them if they improve their execution? There's still, anytime there's an if, the market's not going to jump in front of the if. It's going to want to see it first, and then you're going to see the momentum go back into the stock. For me, I think so. I think that you've got the right guy at the helm here. I think Mike is doing the right things. Mike Dowstar is doing the right things and really whipping Novo Nordisk back into shape when it's needed to do this for probably about a decade.
I also think that Eli Lilly, being based in the US, has some insight into the US healthcare system that Novo Nordisk has been missing, but they have been hiring a lot of US based employees recently. So I wonder if they're trying to fix that because Eli Lilly got Zepbound approved for sleep apnea. Which was very interesting because it actually doesn't do anything for sleep apnea, but they just know if people lose weight, there's a significant portion of people who do improve with their sleep apnea. So the FDA did approve it. But Novo Nordisk said that at the time that happened, I don't know if they've switched in the last 9 months since this has happened, that actually it's been over a year, that they had no interest in approving Wegovy for alternate indications, which is really frustrating to a lot of Americans because it's just expensive. And if your insurance won't pay for it, it's just out of reach. And so Eli Lilly saying like, okay, if we can get this approved for something insurance will pay for, more Americans can take it and we can make more money, with Novo Nordisk saying like, no, just pay for it out of pocket. That's just not seeing how the healthcare system in the US, as broken as it is, works.
It's a really good point. And I think that's actually the part two conversation. Let's schedule this for sometime in March where we talk about the business school case study of why did Novo miss this so badly, right? This is a company that's got a lot of really good things about a lot of good positive attributes. It's very research heavy. Like Novo as a company does solid research and develops really good drugs. One thing they haven't done so good is distribution, right? Why is it that Hims and Hers, why didn't Novo just do that? Why didn't Novo Nordisk have their own platform? They're like, hey, you can easily get the drug, make an appointment online, we'll ship it to you. So Hims and Hers took advantage of the opportunity to say, hey, this is hard for patients to even get this stuff right now. Let's make it as easy and as cheap as possible. I mean, I think Novo is starting to realize they got to do a better job on the downstream of the drug development that they're doing a good job with right now. And they got to start having a better relationship with patients and insurers too, and things like this. It's hard. It's hard to do everything. And I think that they've not done as good of a job on that part of their business.
Well, this partnership could be a really interesting move then going forward.
And they need them. They need them. No doubt about it. Yeah. Okay, great. So I mean, this was kind of a fun one. I think we're gonna call it at that. We're here at the about 9:30. So we'll continue this gossip and feud that's ongoing between BFFs, Novo Nordisk, and Hims and Hers. I hope that it gets resolved. I wish the best for them. I hope they go to prom together. Whatever they end up doing with this, it's going to be a good outcome, I think, for both companies. It does seem though like things are heading in the right direction after a little bit of a spat there in January and February. I think we're back on the right track here in March. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens next with Novo Nordisk and Hims and Hers. And again, like I mentioned just a moment ago, I think we're going to do a part two on this one and maybe even get some guest perspectives on this too from both sides of the coin later in March or maybe in early April. So that's still to come. In the meantime, today's Friday the 13th. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. We'll be back again on Monday. In the meantime, I wish you love. I wish you happiness and be kind to one another. We'll see you again on Monday.